Okay, thank you for Gugun as the moderator. Start with the first material, namely ICT and communication. The evolution of means of communication. Since ancient times, humans have created various means of communication, especially long-distance communication media, to obtain information or other purposes without having to go directly to the destination to find out that information. Have you have you ever imagined what will be happen if the history of the development of communication never happened at all? Fortunately, humans as social creatures who have the superiority of reason over other gods creatures have clever ways of understanding one another. Yes, it's communication. The history of communication development continues to change at every time, starting from prehistoric times to the modern era as it is today. Immediately, this is the history of the development of communication tools from time to time that humans have created to obtain information more easily and maximally. The first one is postal pigeon. Postal pigeon is means of communication using pigeons as a messenger. Pigeons were chosen because they are smart, have a strong memory, navigation ability, and a natural instinct to return to the nest. This method originated from the Persians who trained pigeons. The second is telegraph. Telegraph is a tool for sending and receiving messages remotely. Messages sent by the operator using Morse code. The third is telephone. The invention of the telephone was fueled by the growing and increasing demand for the use of telegraph. The first telephone network connected Gambir and Tanjung Priok or Batavia. Furthermore, telephone networks were made in other major cities. The fourth is telegram. Telegram contains a communication of codes transmitted by the telegraph. These telegram sending rates are cheaper than telephones, although the rates are calculated based on the number of characters including function. The fifth is radio call. Radio call is a telecommunication tool to convey and receive short message. Uh, the sixth, email. Email is a letter over a computer network such as the internet. Electronic mail came into use in the 1916. The seventh is internet. Interconnecting networking started in 1969 as ARPANET. Currently, post and the telecommunication have not seen the internet business yet. Uh, the eighth is handphone. The invention of the mobile phone occurred in 1973 by Martin Cooper of Motorola Corp. Nine, in, nine is instant messaging. Instant messaging is an internet technology where internet network users can send short messages at the same time. And the last is mobile chat messengers. Almost the same as instant messaging, but applied to a high-tech cell phone or smartphone. Communication as a system, in terms of shape, the system can be divided into two types. The first one is open system, is a system in which the process is open from the influence of the environment around it. And the second one is closed system. Closed system is a system where the process is closed from outside influences. If the system concept is related to the communication process, it can be said that communication is a system. This is reflected in the elements that support it's an integrative unit that depends on one another. Okay, the next material is communication channel. Communication channels are tools and means that facilitate the delivery of messages. The message here can be in the form of talking symbols such as word, picture, or action. The analogy for channels is a boat carrying cargo from the one port to another. There are two kinds of communication channels, namely personal communication channels and non-personal communication channels. Personal communication channels is it's including two or more people who who communicate directly with each other. They can communicate to face, one person through the audience by telephone or by letter. And the second one is non-personal communication channels. It's delivering messages without making any contact and personal interaction, but it's done by the media, events, atmospheres, and so on. Okay. Next is forms of media channels. The forms of media channels, there are media telephone, radio, media television, print media, and internet media. Okay, that's all for me, moderator.
Thank you, Rupa, for your explanation. The next material will be explained by Saida Saia. To Saida, time is yours.
Okay, thank you for moderator. It is in this time I will explain about distinctive characteristic of particular channels and modes. Characteristic of communication channel. In the delivery of information, there are two channels of communication, personal and non-personal, or we can call mass media. First point, personal communication channel. This communication channel, both their direct and group, is more persuasive than the mass media. This is caused by several factors. First, delivery of our messages can be done directly to the target audience. Second, can be done in more detail according to real situation and condition. Third, the communicator can immediately know the reaction, feedback, and responses from the audience on the content of the message he conveys. The last, the communicator or source can immediately provide an explanation if there is a misunderstanding or misperception of the receiving the message or the audience for message it conveys. Second point, mass media communication channels. Mass media communication channels. This channel has a wide range of audience, even if it is not limited to its vast capabilities. For example, like big billboards or booklets. The next communication modes. The rule of telecommunication recognizes three basic modes of communication. A simplex is a one-way communication mode. Here, the recipient cannot provide feedback. B. Duplex or full duplex. Duplex is two-way communication medium where the sender and receiver can communicate both ways together. C. Half duplex. Half duplex communicates in two directions alternately. So when there is communication between A and B, when A sends information or speaks, B will receive information or listening. ICT and the relative position of language. Among the effect of ICT on human communication patterns over the past 6,000 years, there has been a shift in the balance between the various channels and modes of communication. The introduction of the telephone in the late 19th century and the spread of radio in a shift in the other direction, this shift toward verbal communication. As the balance between the modes of communication changes, so does the position of the language. To take a simple example, it is possible to learn to dance by following a written description of the steps, which is much more difficult to perform than to do it by looking at a diagram depicting various positions. Influence of fluctuating technological conditions, individual pathways and mode can be seen in the world of education where the work that students now produce is visual far superior to the task submitted by their predecessor. Finally, apart from being seen and exploited differently at different moments in time, the semiotic potential is is not utilized in the same way across cultures. These fluctuations have implication for us on our concept of literacy and our approach to language learning. I think that's all from my material. Thank you. Back to moderator.
Thank you, Saida, for your explanation. And the last material will be explained by myself. Participant roles, source, and receiver. The source and the receiver in a dyadic situation. It is easy to identify the source and the receiver in a dyadic situation, such as the but subsume several concepts can be found in those situations in which the speaker or receiver acts as an intermediary. Example, as a spokesperson or more generally as a messenger charged with relaying some information. 3 cents of the term speaker by Goffman, 1981, page 226. Goffman observed that the term speaker is used in 3 senses. The most common meaning is animator, the person who utters the words. A second meaning is author, the person who composes the text that is uttered. The third is the meaning of principle, the person whose position and belief the words reflect. Next is communication characteristic. Introductory comments. First, 3 modifications are made to Thomson's model. Thomson's 1995 is used below as a platform for mapping out the key dimensions of communication as an interactional process, an ongoing dynamic process between two or more parties. First consists in splitting Thomson's constitution into two separate variables, space coordinates and time coordinates. The second modification is the integration of participant roles, which is designed to bring to the fore the often different effects that the variable have on the source and the receiver. The third modification, the replacement of dialogical or monological with the construct of interactivity, which covers feedback as well as reciprocity. Next is space coordinates. In face-to-face communication. One of the main differences between face-to-face and mediated communication is that whereas the former takes place in a shared spatial and temporal context, the media allow the context of production and the context of reception to be separated. As a result, communication can stretch across both time and space. Next is close correlation between distance and difficulties. From a technological standpoint, there is a close correlation between distance and difficulties. Geographical obstacles such as mountains and lakes have undoubtedly faced the development of telecommunication with problems, but the main challenge and the main objective have been to establish communication over long distance. Is it true that as with technology, distance brings problems because of the increased likelihood of encountering new phenomena, peculiar terms, expression, gesture, accents, even in an entirely different language? In one-way communication, the crucial the extent to which the receiver is acquainted with the variant used by the source. Where communication is two-way, the situation is more complicated. That participant or both may not be accustomed to the other party variety. Okay, that's all our presentation. Now we open.
Moderator Andra, can you please start
You are
begin
now
your
muted. You are
presentation,
now
please?
unmuted. You are now muted.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today we will continue the explanation before from the group 1 ICT and Communication. We first one I will introduce the group. The first one is Haura Dityana, the second is Salsabila Anggun Pratiwi, and the third one is Andra Monisup, or it's me. The first speaker will be Haura Dityana. So, Aura, the place is yours.
Thank you. Today's material is ICT and Communication, and I will continue the first group, material of the presentation. So, the first is time coordinate. Temporal distance between production and reception covers a spectrum of possibilities from intervals of a few seconds to time gaps of hundreds, even thousand years. The effect of temporal dimension, the impact of transmission speed on encoding and decoding condition, it is more important. The example is when we are doing a video conference, when we have a bad connection, internet connection, we won't have, we won't get a whole information from that meeting uh, because of the internet connection is bad. Uh, okay, time coordinate also affect communication in other way. The impact is on encoding and decoding. Third, the relation between time and language. The relation between time and language. Language change over time. A text that produced in a different period may contain some features that are unusual for some readers. A language change is a gradual changes which have close relation with time, but the speed of change is different. The older the text is, it will contain more archaisms. Next, the simple relationship between distance and differences makes the occurrence of difficulties more predictable than with physical distance. Familiarity with some aspect may be different from a person to another. Archaisms are not common problem because first, they are convenient to one-way communication. Second, communication tends to revolve around contemporary events. Okay, next is range of symbolic cues. The function of cues are first, nonverbal auditory cues like prosodic features. Second, visual cues like facial expression and gestures, body gestures. Third, tactile cues like physical contact. When interacting face to face, we often use cues to to explain more about what we are saying. Although cues are universal, their meaning can be different in each region. It's like thumbs up. Thumbs up mean great job in America, but in Greece and Middle Eastern, it means wake up on your own and it's yours. And it's kind of rude in Greece and Middle Eastern. Sneller in 1988 present the result of tests involving Ethiopian newcomers to Israel, which showed that nearly 70% of 26 typical Ethiopian emblems, such as the use of four stretched fingers put diagonally over the lips, which is intended to mean be quiet, were misunderstood by a group of 46 college students. The next questions I give back to the moderator.
Okay, thank you, Aura Dityana. The next is Salsabila. The place is yours.
Okay, thank you, moderator. The next material is interactivity. The term interactivity, as used in this study, covers two distinct variables: reciprocity and simultaneous feedback. First is reciprocity, has to do with whether or not participants take turns at acting as such and receiver. If they do, the interaction is said to be reciprocal. If they don't, it is non-reciprocal. In reciprocal communication, the listener eventually becomes the speaker and responds verbally. Meanwhile, his or her reaction frequently manifests itself through facial expressions, gestures, or sounds. The second is simultaneous feedback, whereas reciprocity is concerned with role alternations, Simultaneous feedback refers to the availability of involved opportunities that enable the search to evaluate the effect that their message has on the recipient and modulate their behavior accordingly. In other words, simultaneous feedback enables the search to take self-corrective action. On simultaneous feedback will depend on the number of channels available, with particular reference to auditory and visual presence. This gives four main scenarios applicable to both one-way and two-way communication. The first is the search can both see and hear the recipient. The search can see but not hear them. The search can hear but not see them. And the last is the search can neither see nor hear the recipient. Next material is action orientation. Next slide, please. Okay, action orientation relates to the extent to which communication is oriented to specific others rather than to an indefinite range of potential recipients. In face-to-face and mediated interpersonal communication, the receiver is typically selected by and known to. How well they know each other will vary, but in his or her discourse, this search will take account of their respective status, their past history together, prior statement, and any form of feedback available. Okay, I think that's all about my presentation. Back to moderator.
Okay, thank you, Salsabila. So the last will be me. Can you everyday like so many other aspects of life, the types of communication that people engage in are shaped by kind of institution that structure their society and by current trends in individual interaction. The impact will vary according to personal circumstances, including whether communication is in L1 or L2. But use cannot but be affected by the backdrop against which individual practice develop. It would be foolish to expect the use of L2 media to replicate either the use of media in the L2 community or an individual's use of L1 media. It would be equally foolish not to expect the use of media in L2 community and personal media history to have some bearing on the use they make of L2 media. In these sections, consider the place of mediated communication in contemporary life. I begin by examining some relevant media research findings and then move on to discuss the potential impact of bilingualism of media use. The development of devices that are easy to carry and can be used outdoors as well as indoors has helped mediated communication become more visible. There can be no doubt that the media are part of the fabric of daily life and that the reception of media products has become more than ever a routine. Practically, activity which is not necessarily as an exclusive activity, but can be mixed with acti- other which other activity such as eating or home tasks. This is particularly true of radio, which is frequently used for background noise, but it also applies to television and telephone, especially mobiles and the internet. It is a consumption pattern that is very frequent among the 16 until 25% of media. Internet use is most frequently combined with listening to the radio, with having the TV on not far behind internet use with reading a magazine is much less frequent. Just about missing internet use with reading the paper. It is not surprising, therefore, that the past few years have witnessed a dramatic increase in media ownership. Internet access with a 1% decrease for telephone ownership, presumably owing to the diffusion of mobile telephony. In contrast, the proportion of British households with durable goods such as washing machine and microwaves has remained stable across the globe. The most accessibility information and communication technology is still radio. Everywhere radio way more common than television. However, other technology are gaining ground. The growing importance of media in modern society has been accompanied by change in use, and in the case of mass media, the types of programs that are broadcast, media consumption has been the object of much scrutiny, not least by advertisers keen to maximize cost effectiveness. Research has shown that consumption patterns vary from country to country across the population and within the lifespan of an individual. At an individual level, patterns laid down in childhood and early adolescence tend to be carried into adulthood, so that by and large, high media users can con- continue to make more use of the media than lower users. At the same time, use varies with age as well with technological and social change. For instance, report that the introduction of cable television and the video cassette recorder into Sweden initiated a change from a system characterized mainly by supply or output control to a system increasingly characterized by demand or shift control. This structural change in turn led to an increase in the amount of television watched by other adolescents whose tastes were better catered for. Next, please. Next, please. Discussion and conclusion. It has been claimed that educational systems are preparing people for the past for the ideas and attitudes and values of way of life that is fading away and for work in areas of shrinking labor requirements. What does language education currently prepare learners for? The view taken in this book is that if we aim of the language learning is to produce all-round communicators, L2 users need to be able to handle both face-to-face and mediate communications, and relatedly that this requires some modification of our approach to language education. Country, through people's desires to extend their horizon and feel part of a wider community as shown, for example, by prevalence of part of the British public for American or European television programs that enable them to reimagine the boundaries of community to the large number of people involved in immediate communication with correspondents from different language backgrounds. Remain a thorny issue from a quantitative point of view. Current patterns of media use would seem to give priority to reception over productions. High level of mass consumption automized calls, voice generation, the outsourcing of call centers are factors that put a premium on good comprehension skill. On the other hand, the significance of particular media cannot be assessed solely on the basis of quantitative measures. Ultimately, the decisions as to what constitutes the right balance can only be taken on a case-by-case basis. In the light of people, in the light of people motives for learning the language, the activities, the activists, the activities they are like to undertake and the knowledge and skills that this draw on. On three through people desire to extend. While the case for reappraising language learning is clear, what way is to be given to development of particular linguistic remains of thorny issues. I think that's all. Thank you.